Okay, and now we have Mrs. Calos' son, Stefen. He's our speaker today. And Stefen is here. Last year, he talked about Hopewell High School before Coach Littlepage, but this year, it's the title is Hopewell High School Basketball AD, the Coach Littlepage era. You're in for a very good presentation, and I got a little bit of a sneak peek before, but there's definitely video, which is going to be really fun. Okay, Stefen Calos was born in Hopewell and graduated from Hopewell High School. He practices law at Sands Anderson PC. Stefen provides color commentary for Hopewell basketball and football games on WHAP Fox Sports Radio, which Sands Anderson proudly sponsors. And if you have not listened to him on the radio, it's very entertaining, very informative, and my mother in her last year listened faithfully because my son was the quarterback for Hopewell High, and she was delighted to listen when she couldn't attend. So, Stefen Calos, welcome.
Thank you, Susan. I'm really excited to be here doing this. It's been a blast, a lot of old memories with Coach Littlepage. A lot of you knew Coach Littlepage, a lot of you didn't. So I'm going to sort of make sure we all get on the same page by telling you some things that some of you might know and others of you don't know, but you will know by the time we're done. As Susan said last time, the presentation I did last year was called Hopewell Basketball BC, and the BC stood for Before Coach Littlepage. And the reason I chose to do that is because people thought of Hopewell basketball, and I don't mean everybody, but you know, the newer, younger generation don't know their history, so I wanted them to know that yes, there was Hopewell basketball before Coach Littlepage came on the scene. And you know what? It was pretty good. I'll show you some things that substantiate that. But Hopewell was very good in basketball, and there was other good basketball happening in Hopewell at the same time. And that's sort of a big part of what we're going to talk about today, and things that Coach Littlepage did to make that happen. Hopewell basketball BC covered a period from 1925 when the school opened, and incidentally, Jeff will talk about this on the air, but this is essentially the 100th anniversary of Hopewell football and basketball that we have for our upcoming season. And by Jeff, I'm looking at Jeff Butler, play-by-play guy for Hopewell Sports, and I'm one of his color commentators, along with Charlie Dane, who's present today, Ed Golson, who could be but might not be. We'll talk about him as well. Bill Littlepage was a color commentator for Jeff Butler, and others, Marshall Parker, who we'll also talk about today, and some of his family's here. So anyway, we're talking about our color commentary, radio broadcast, and Coach Littlepage being involved in that. But the period that we talked about last year before Coach Littlepage was from 1925 until he got here, and as you'll hear, in 1963. So what's that? 55, 60, almost 40 years. The Coach Littlepage era lasted in Hopewell for 44 years, but we're really going to focus on the first decade this time because there's just too much material. But I will spill in past the first decade to make some points. But this is not his entire career by any means. Like I said, it was just too much material. And also, for research purposes, I want to thank Jeannie with the library and Brian. They provided these kaleidoscopes, Hopewell High School yearbooks for many years up through 1977, which nicely covered the first 10 years of the Coach Littlepage era. But the great news is that we've recently learned through Brian and Jeannie's efforts that we're now going to be able to put through 2004 online to bridge the gap. And so great kudos to them for all their help in putting this together. Some more thanks go to Charlie Dane and Brandon Butterworth, who might or might not be here, and Daniel Jones. The videos that Susan mentioned resulted from a program that we put together interviewing Coach Littlepage in his house And you're going to see snippets of that. Some of you might have seen some or all of the interview. It's online. I commend it to you. You can just go to YouTube and punch in Bill Littlepage interview. It's the first thing that pops up. There's been a whole lot of views of that interview. But these are snippets. If you've already seen the interview, sorry. But I did try to tailor these to make some very specific points that we're going to talk about today. So, as I said, this is the first decade, 1963 to 1972. It was a decade of great success and great change. And if you look at those two photos, the first varsity, the first year that Coach Littlepage got there, and contrast that with the next year, which, spoiler alert, incidentally, was Hopewell's first state championship in basketball. So that 10-year period, I kind of got lucky on it because on the 10th year, Coach Littlepage won Hopewell's first state championship. So that's that team you're looking at. We'll talk more about who some of those guys are, but obviously that's Coach Littlepage in the middle there, front row, the one without the uniform. The way we work, what was happening here, what was happening nationally. It was a very interesting time, and I showed this last time in my BC before Coach Littlepage's presentation, but you can see two clippings from the Hopewell News. The first one headline is Devils finish runners-up in state basketball play. That's from 1959, and Hopewell went to the state final and lost. They almost won their first state championship then. And like I said, Hopewell basketball was good when Coach Littlepage got here. In BC, it was good. It got better, but it was very good then. But what's that thing on the right? Woodson Trotters after 5th straight title. We talked about this last time, but Woodson, for those who don't know, was Carter Woodson's school. And they dominated the 1950s in basketball in their class, their classification. And of course, the classifications I'm talking about are white, Hopewell High School and other high schools, and black, Woodson and people that they play. So people like me would think, gosh, what would happen if we just kind of had a merger and put them together? And if you look in this box score, there are names that you can see, sons and people who came after them. I'm just looking at this, but Wheat, Walden, Hayes. These are people who played and had to play at Woodson. But interestingly, these were in the same time. They were both in 1959. Hopewell School went to the state final. Woodson is trying to win yet another state championship in its classification. So if you ask yourself, how could that be? You're talking 1959. I thought that Supreme Court case, Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas, was from 1954. And you're telling me 5 years later they're still segregated and separated and playing on two parallel paths. Well, that happened pretty much everywhere, and I think the main reason it happened is because the Supreme Court, and sorry, I'm a lawyer, the Supreme Court, in its opinion, said we're going to do this integration with, quote, all deliberate speed, unquote. So a lot of people took that pretty seriously from governors on down. They closed schools, they closed schoolhouses, a lot of private schools popped up, and a lot of stuff like that happened with massive resistance. There's a really good thing at the Virginia Museum of History and Culture about Rosenwald schools that talk about the opportunities blacks had through a conglomeration with Mr. Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington, where they were allowed to open these schools all over the state and all over the southeast. But in 1958, Hopewell did something that I've never seen or heard another place do. Hopewell opened a brand new all-black high school called the new Carter G. Woodson School. And that's 4 years after Brown, when you're supposed to be integrated with all deliberate speed. I've always asked myself, how did that happen? That's remarkable. It's not just massive resistance. It's not shutting the door. It's opening a new school. Well, I have theories, and I've never been able to find anybody who can tell me about it. I've never seen records, and I really haven't tried that hard, but I'm going to try hard someday. but to figure this out. But my theory is that the Woodson School, if you go to it, if you went to it, when I went to it after it was integrated and became the middle school, the gymnasium there is gorgeous. It's small, but it's beautiful. It's very different than Hopewell High School even now. It has concrete stands, they're not bleachers. It has portals, like in a college and pro facility. It has steps that go underneath. It's just a gym. And my theory is that people from the Hopewell side said, well, you know, would you like this new building that's really, really nice? It actually wasn't even a building, it was a campus with this remarkable gymnasium. And that's what happened, I think. I know that's what happened. I just don't know that's how Hopewell didn't integrate sooner. But that's where we were in 1959, no matter what your theories were. So enter Bill Littlepage and this interview. And this, I'm not going to show you the whole interview. This is the beginning of the interview. I just want to get you a taste of it. Again, this started from Brandon Butterworth, who actually played a role for Coach Littlepage, Charlie Dane likewise, and Daniel Jones, son of Johnny Jones, big Hopewell guy, athletics and so forth. And this interview happened on March 16, 2022. It also happened pretty quickly. We got the call of Charlie probably in early March. And Charlie and I had interviewed, along with Jeff Butler, Coach Littlepage, a few months before. We'd also interviewed him and Ed Golson, one of his star players, before that. And by then, Charlie, I think we knew that Coach Littlepage, you didn't really need to worry about your Q's and A's. You knew he was going to tell your story, his story. And he does that remarkably. He's 86 years old here, and we went to his house. He couldn't have been more gracious. His wife, Brenda, couldn't have been more gracious to have us in the house. I think there might be some family here, but I'm really not sure. But in any event, we went to the house and said, Coach, how you doing? Doing well, knee hurts a little bit, but that's about it. He was a big golfer after his basketball coaching career. He goes, yeah, I'll get it straight. And so we just explained, mostly Charlie, that we were just trying to commemorate history, because you never know. We want this to go down to future generations and people to know, what really happened here. So he was very gracious and he answered all our questions, and it was just a great time. Then, very shortly after that, I remember getting a text from Ed Golson, one of the star players, good friend of ours, all of ours, and said, Coach Littlepage is sick. Coach Littlepage has cancer. Coach Littlepage is not going to live much longer. And I'm almost crying. But he told us that, and told me that, and word spread very quickly. And 5 months to the day, Coach Littlepage is dead. August 16th, 2022. Tomorrow is the eve of the 2-year anniversary. And very, very sad, as you can tell from me. But, so it's kind of fitting that we might be commemorating him here today. But that's what happened. I also got a text from Derek Tompkins, another one of Coach Littlepage's star players who played at VCU and played pro in Europe just the other day. And he said, my birthday is August 16, 2022. So Derek Tompkins, one of Coach Littlepage's stars, and I'm sure favorite players, shared a birthday with his death date. I don't know, there are a lot of parallels, things like that there.
Stefen,
Yes.
could you hold your mic up just a little closer?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay. You don't want me to start over? And please tell me that, because from my vantage point, I can hear myself really well. In any event, I'll just give you the sneak preview of what this looked like, and I'm going to explain this song next. So what's that song and what's the relevance of that? Most of you know that's the song that the Harlem Globetrotters co-opted years ago. Actually researched, I didn't really always wonder, but last week I wondered who Sweet Georgia Brown was. And she was some politician and Georgia's daughter. The song had really nothing to do with the Globetrotters. They co-opted it. And then Hopewell co-opted it at some point. Coach Littlepage loved it. I don't know who gets the credit. We'll give Teresa Parker the credit. It was some cheerleader coach, I think. She's way too young for that. But they brought in that song, and the cheerleaders used to do this little dance before all the games around the mid-court circle. And it was just a delightful thing no one I ever saw did. And one of the people who did it was Becky Littlepage, and I'll show you a picture of her later on, but she was a mascot cheerleader, and she would be out there dancing to Sweet Georgia Brown. But this is the era, pardon my computer, I'm not blaming it on me. Okay, so these are cheerleaders from that era in the 1960s, the first decade, and they would get up and at the mid-court circle right before a game, they would do this dance to Sweet Georgia Brown. It's a great Hopewell tradition. I think we've gotten away from it, but who knows, maybe we'll bring it back after this. Coach Littlepage was born in King and Queen County, and he coached briefly in Caroline County where he met his wife Brenda, and then moved to Kentucky because Kentucky's a hotbed for basketball and he wanted to give it a go there. They got to Kentucky and he spent a year there as an assistant, and then decided they really wanted to get back to Virginia, both being Virginians. And so they were looking around different cities. He wanted to be in a city. He said, even though he's a country boy, he liked city life. And so I'll just let Coach Littlepage tell you, 86-year-old Coach Littlepage, March of 2022, tell you why he decided to come to Hopewell.
Hopewell looked like the best thing. So we came here in 62, 63, and George Orr was the head coach, great man. I enjoyed working with him so much. But Charlie Smith was the superintendent then. And Mr. Smith had told me that, hey, we're thinking about putting Mr. Orr into administration. We'll probably be looking for a head basketball coach next year. He said, I'm not going to promise you anything, but he said you certainly would be in the running for the job. You know, well, I thought that was laying it out there pretty good. I like that, his approach.
Well, I'd say Charlie Smith made a good call there because Coach Littlepage became the winningest coach in Virginia high school history. He's National Coach of the Year. He's a member of 5 Halls of Fame. I'll show you what those are as we move into this, but he was a legend. He was a giant. We thought he might not stick around because colleges wanted him, and he just really had what it is. He had leadership. You can learn a lot. This is not really about sports. It rarely is. I just think sports are a great way to learn history and a great way to learn principles, and I can't think of a person better at it than Bill Littlepage. But you think about what he has to say and how he says it, and think about leadership and leadership that might be lacking in our world today. And you know, you just can't help but feel good about Bill Littlepage and what a difference he made in this community.
Hopewell
same issue.
looked like the best thing.
We're going to figure this out. Foreshadowing, I call this. He was the junior varsity coach his first year, not the varsity coach, as you heard. But I wanted to include this. Number one, it's a great picture, but number two, the caption, if you can't read it, says that the B Team Blue Devils, the junior varsity, midway in their climb to the varsity, have shown characteristics vital to future varsity teams. High scoring and teamwork were displayed continuously. These, plus spirit and enthusiasm, helped give this group of boys a great record. And as you can see from this, they lost their first game and then won all the rest. They averaged 72 points a game. This is a JV high school team. Gave up only 43. If you translate that to an NBA team that plays a third longer, 8-minute quarters instead of 12-minute quarters instead of 8-minute quarters like in high school, they would have averaged 109 points a game if they played that long. This is a very prescient thing that the Kaleidoscope wrote. This sort of literally foreshadowed what was to come. I'm sure who wrote it didn't realize how right that person would be, but pretty remarkable. And Coach Littlepage, like I said, had a great memory, and I'll show you some more times. He was amazing. We didn't practice for this interview. It was just his memory, which was just astounding. But here's his take, again, unrehearsed, on that first season.
anyway, I had the JV team that year. We lost our first game to John Marshall and didn't lose another one.
Now, I talked earlier about, gee, what would happen if we took those 1959 articles and merged these guys together? Well, it finally happened. The earliest I could find was 1966 to 1967, and I call that the merger. A couple of things about this photo. Number one, this was the era of nationally, you know what was going on, but basketball nationally was very interesting too. The 1966 NCAA, the college champions, was a school then called Texas Western. It's now known as UTEP, University of Texas El Paso. They won the national championship. They started an all-black starting five in that ball game and throughout that year. And they beat Kentucky, the University of Kentucky, the Blue Blood, the Royals, to this day of college basketball. The only difference between this day and that day was Kentucky and their coach, the legendary Adolph Rupp, were all white. And Adolph Rupp said, we will always be all white, and we will beat anybody, including Texas Western. Well, guess what? Texas Western won the national championship. So this is the era that was going on, and it changed college basketball, they say, forever, and probably changed high school basketball quite a bit too. But for Hopewell, here's your merger. Wasn't much of a merger, but it's the only one we had. I think I learned how to use the pointer here. But yeah, there you go. But number 24 there is Bernie Epps, whose father was an administrator and principal when I was growing up. And he was the first black to play for Hopewell High School, as far as I could tell. Interestingly, as Dr. Lehman came up to say hello to me, he brought me his Bridgewater College, where I mentioned Coach Littlepage went, yearbook to show me an incredibly academic picture of Bill Littlepage in horn-rimmed glasses. I would put this on the screen if I could, but I don't think anybody has that kind of technology. But I did want to share that there's I'm just going to hold it up, pretend like you can see it, but there's a photo of the basketball team, and one of the players there identified, of course, is Bill Littlepage, number 24. I never knew that, number 24. Look at the number of Bernie Epps, number 24. I thought that was a very interesting coincidence. For a little fun, can anybody tell me who number 40 is?
Mike Whitley?
Nope.
No, Mike Whitley's behind him.
Yeah,
Whitley's 44.
Mike
Mike Whitley's
Whitley's,
44.
Mike Whitley's right there. I'll just tell you because it's relevant to this program until the last couple. That's David Harless. That's right. And for those who haven't been here before, David used to set the way for these Lunch and Learn lectures, among other things, for Historic Hopewell Foundation. But the whole merger thing was a big deal in a lot of places, but true to Coach Littlepage, he just had such grace and such class, it really wasn't an issue. I mean, you can hear it in his own words, which are so much better than mine.
But I think the key is that we looked at them as Blue Devils, not as 5 or 6 black guys, 5 or 6 white guys, and that made up your team. So the transition to me was quite easy.
Now, everything I think it's fair to say was falling into place. Here's a team, clearly a merged team, 1967 to 68. Remember, he had just become a varsity coach like 5 years ago. And they were already playing in the state semifinal in Charlottesville. That's where it was played back then. In fact, that's where it was played when Hopewell went in 1959, just a different arena. I think it played at Memorial Gym, and now it's at the brand new University Hall. So Hopewell goes all the way to the state semifinals in Coach Littlepage's, like 4th or 5th year as head coach. Loses by 2 to a school called Andrew Lewis by 2 points, and Andrew Lewis goes on to be the state champs. So they're clearly knocking on the door at that point under Coach Littlepage. And by then, and he's very modest. I mean, this ascension and this ultimate state title has everything to do with Coach Littlepage and his leadership and his skill and his knowledge of the game and his relationships with people. But in his true modest nature, I'll let him tell you what he thinks it really was. And it was a part of it, but it wasn't the whole part.
And the main reason that it fell in place was the new facility. We had such pride in that facility, the players, and how it was. We knew it was the best gymnasium in the state, and still one of the very best, as you pointed out. But the students at that time backed us so much, and they had pride.
And that facility was great, still is. They just replaced the floor, but they kept what they started several years ago after he retired, maybe even before. They named it Coach Littlepage Court, and that's kind of similar to what Duke did at Cameron Indoor Stadium. They kind of started it with the Coach K Court for Coach Krzyzewski, who was so successful there. But you know, I think Coach Littlepage, he had lots of opportunities. He hinted at that. We always knew it. He could have had the VCU job had he wanted it around this era because they liked the way he was handling his teams. That job eventually went to Coach Chuck Noe, who also coached at Hopewell High School, who we highlighted, among other places, who we highlighted in the Hopewell, the BC presentation last year. But you know, I think Coach Littlepage certainly could have had the VCU job. If he had wanted to go to the Atlantic Coast Conference, I think he could have done that. I think the sky was the limit. He was just that type of coach. You listen to him, you watch him be interviewed, you watch him in practices, you watch him during games, and you know, he was at the highest level as a coach. And in fact, he coached.
And the main
he coached a lot of players indirectly. Well, he coached them directly, but at those other levels, because he was head coach of the he was coach of the U.S. Olympic Trials team. He was coach of Virginia High School All-Star teams, and he was coach of the McDonald's All-American team. That's the team that selects the best players every year, names you've heard of, like Allen Iverson and LeBron James and people like that. He coached not necessarily them, but people like that. So he's saying it's all about the facility, but I can tell you it's really about practice and preparation and leadership. I'm going to run through 3 slides here if the technology lets me. The first is Coach Littlepage, just a little heads up. He talks about Monsanto Pope. Monsanto Pope was one of the star basketball players, but was probably an even better football player. He started at the University of Virginia and then had a nice career with the Denver Broncos. The next slide after that I'm going to show you is who I just mentioned, Allen Iverson. Allen Iverson did not play for Hopewell. Allen Iverson played against Hopewell. You might wonder, why am I showing you somebody who didn't play for Hopewell? A couple of reasons. I'm going to show you somebody else later, Moses Malone. The point is that Hopewell played against the very best. Moses Malone was a 3-time NBA Player of the Year. He's in the NBA Hall of Fame. Allen Iverson was an NBA Player of the Year, is an NBA Hall of Famer. They've won multiple world championships between them. And Hopewell played these guys with our guys from right here in Hopewell and played them head-to-head, played them to draws, beat them. And all that was because Coach Littlepage was able to take the talent that he had here and put it together. I'm not picking on Allen Iverson. It's going to look like I am. I really actually like Allen Iverson. He was a real gamer. And what you hear him about to say has to do with him having played in the game and just left it all on the court. And the press doesn't want to talk about the game. They want to talk about how come he didn't come to practice. He scored 33 points and led the team to victory with pretty much a broken ankle. So I'm not picking on Allen, but I just couldn't resist using this. And some of you know what this is going to look like already. And then we'll go in to see what Coach Littlepage says about that. So this is going to be boom, 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 if the technology lets me.
We worked hard in practice. I'll never forget Monsanto Pope and I were talking one time, and he said he had some fans ask him, why is Coach so laid back, like doing the games, which I never thought I was, but that's what they thought. He says, why don't you come to one of our practices?
We're talking about practice, man. I mean, how silly is that, man? We're talking about practice. I know I'm supposed to be there. I know I'm supposed to lead by example. I know that. And I'm not shoving it aside, like it don't mean anything. I know it's important. I do. I honestly do. But we talking about practice, man. What are we talking about? Practice? We're talking about practice, man.
Well, practice makes perfect. And that's what you have to work at. That's what practice is all about. I mean, you don't call practice going in there and throwing the ball out there and let's scrimmage 5-on-5. You're not learning anything like that. And you gotta put time on clock, you gotta work on situations, because somewhere along the line, those situations are gonna come up and you better be prepared.
And one of the things Coach Littlepage did, he had a plan, a written plan for every single practice, all those 44 years. And at the end of each season, he would take those plans and put them in an envelope and put them in a closet. And I'm pretty sure those plans still exist. But, that's how he was. He talks about situations. And Charlie, during this interview, if you get a chance to listen to it, Charlie Dane mentioned he went to a practice once before one of our Final Four appearances in the state tournament, and they ran this play over and over and over. He thinks it's called the 5-second play, where if there's only 5 seconds to go and we're behind and we need a basket, or we're tied and we need to win, what are we going to do? And they ran this play over and over and over. And well, what happened in the state semifinal, that situation arose. 5 seconds to go, we're down by a point or two, and Hopewell runs this 5-second play to perfection. And Charlie said he was sitting next to his wife, and he said, let me tell you what they're about to do, because he just witnessed it, a few days before. And that's exactly what they did, and it worked. And that's the type of preparation and leadership that, can take you a long way, not just in basketball. Now, like I said, he did have a great memory. He's still talking about Allen Iverson here. Allen Iverson is not in the era that we're really covering, but it makes a good point to Coach Littlepage's way and his memory and so forth. So let me play his thoughts on Allen Iverson as a player. And this is going to, the game he's talking about is a state tournament, a deep state tournament game, where Hopewell's playing Bethel, which is probably ranked, well, no doubt ranked #1 in the state, but we've got a very good team as well. And they were supposed to beat us by a lot, and that didn't happen.
He, I don't know, he was just on the stop. They beat us by 3 points in the state tournament. And we had a last second shot, a 3-point attempt by James Pelham that would have tied it and sent it in overtime. We missed.
So he remembered all that. He remembered every play. He remembered every score, and it was remarkable. I'm not picking on James Pelham there, but I'm bringing him in to make a point. Number one, he's playing head-to-head. This is Iverson right here guarding the inbounds. He's playing head-to-head with a guy who's going to be an NBA All-Pro and Hall of Famer. He was a big star at Georgetown. Just an amazing player. Our James Pelham played him head-to-head to a draw. Iverson might have scored a few more points, but not a lot. But anyway, that's what it came down to, and I think that speaks volumes about our players and our coaching, to to have that. And James is an interesting story because he does tie into this first decade. His father was Leon Winfield, who was one of the stars of the state championship team. And Leon's grandson, Elvin Edmonds IV, was a star, in fact, state player of the year in 2020 when Hopewell won the state championship last time. So the thing about Hopewell basketball that's so interesting is the ties. It's like this unbroken connection from 50 plus years ago, really 60 plus years ago. Elvin IV's father coached under Coach LePage as his JV coach. He's now the head coach at Hopewell. But the connections run deep and the continuity is remarkable. And that's really what Coach LePage was trying to do. He would say, I'm not trying to have a good team this year or next year. I'm trying to build a program where we're good every year. And he did that. And that's how you get to be the winningest coach anywhere. You heard Monsanto say that somebody said Coach LePage was laid back. He wasn't. He was very polite, but when it was game time, he was anything but laid back in practice as well. He certainly knew how to behave himself, but if he felt wrong, he would stand up for his team. I think the picture on the left shows you that pretty clearly. The video for this one is something he's talking about before we moved to the new facility, which was at the old Hopewell High School, which was a much smaller gym. And there's a big crowd there. And he, like I said, he's not going to take anything lying down. We'll let him tell you about how he handled this particular situation.
Real either. We lost a tough ball game to Prince George, by the way, one night there. Because people were all standing around the end and was going down to the wire. And we took the ball out of bounds at the end, and I think the game might have been tied or we might have been 1-up or something like that. And one of the fans from Prince George was standing there, knocked the ball out of our player's hand. The official didn't see it. But it dribbled out on the court. Prince George player picks the ball up, lays it in for a layup. They beat us.
Is that an assist?
I don't know, but I had an assist visit to the official's dressing room afterwards. I do remember that. Real either. We lost a tough ball game.
Now, I mentioned
Moses was mighty good. Don't get me.
I mentioned Moses Malone earlier, and again, what's another non-Hopewell guy doing in here? Well, Moses, as I mentioned, was the NBA Hall of Famer, the first guy to go from high school to the pros. He was that good. He was about 6'11". Ultimately, he won multiple NBA titles. But Hopewell played him. Petersburg then, straight up. Hopewell won the state championship in '72. Hopewell won it in '73, '74. Didn't lose a game. It was an amazing time. Hopewell had the highest winning percentage in the 1970s, but against the best competition at the highest level. This region won 6 state championships. Hopewell was right in there in the 1970s. But so that's Moses Malone. He was so good and famous they had to move the games from Petersburg High School, which had a small gym, to 5,000-seat Daniel Gymnasium at Virginia State. So this is Bill LePage talking about Moses. He was asked, probably by Charlie, who was the best you played against, and and he kind of gave the nod to Iverson, which I thought was interesting. But here he is talking about how Moses did his thing.
Oh, but he was a great rebounder because Tassels Taylor, who liked to put the ball up from outside for them, and I call him Tassels because he liked to wear the tassels on his socks and all. But that was Moses. Grab that ball on the right side, stick it back in. Grab it on the left side, stick it back in.
So here's that team, the state championship team in 1972. You got Ed Golson up there, who we've talked about, color commentator and just all-around great guy. You got, I can't see too well from here, but you got Willie McCray, the big center, and another one who was a great basketball player, but probably an even better football player. He played football for the University of Alabama under Coach Barrett Bryant, and then he went on to play in the pros for the San Francisco 49ers. You got Leon Winfield down here, father of James Pelham and grandfather of Elvin Edmonds IV, state champ, who incidentally broke James's all-time Hopewell scoring record. So hoops really runs in that family for sure. But several other guys, one of whom is Jerry Alexander, and then Alan Brooks is in this picture. He's one of the other starters. Just a great team. Here's Coach Littlepage, pretty happy. Funny thing about this picture, though, it looks like they're celebrating the state championship. They're actually celebrating the regular season district championship. And they went to the district tournament, didn't win. They lost in the final to Thomas Dale. But because they were regular season district champs, they still went to the regional tournament where they won and then the state tournament where they won. So I tell you that because Hopewell lost only 2 games that year, to Thomas Dale and to Petersburg. So sometimes they weren't even the best team in their district. They weren't even the second best, but the district was so good, they were good enough to be the best team in the state. So again, I just can't emphasize how strong basketball was around here at that time especially. Now, Coach Littlepage, like I said, he's CEO material. He could have done anything he wanted, anywhere he wanted, and that's what he did. But the leadership and the academics and so forth were great. But I love this particular quote. It's so typical of him. He was incredibly well-spoken and a great, great interview. And he's talking about going to Charlottesville every year. That was their goal, to go to the state tournament in Charlottesville at that time.
The one thing that when I say we, I'm talking about the team of that year, that particular year, and myself used to talk about was going to Charlottesville. And that's exactly the terminology that we use. We didn't say going to the state. I hate to this day to hear people refer to, oh, we're going to states. Where'd that extra S come in?
Now, like I said earlier, it's a family affair. He did have his sons on the team, as you'll hear, but he had a real son, Jeff, who's there. He was the consummate ball boy, among other things. He was a fixture, and his daughter, Becky, there in her little Hopewell cheerleader uniform. She was part of the thing at the beginning of the game they did with the Globetrotters' Sweet Georgia Brown song. And I'm pretty sure Mrs. Littlepage sold me a ticket or two to get into a ball game. So it was a complete family affair, and even though Bill spent a lot of time with his teams, he spent even more with his family. Great coach, probably better dad, hard to believe. This little snippet from the Kaleidoscope, I included it because it's got a quote from one of those players I mentioned, Jerry Alexander. Now remember, he's saying this in high school. This isn't someone who's paid professionally writing a statement. This is a quote in high school, a high school kid. He says, "Never in my 4 years of high school have I met anyone like him." Speaking of Coach Littlepage, "I consider Coach Littlepage a true friend besides being my coach and teacher. He's understanding and easygoing. He knows when you're down, and in his subtle, non-defensive way, he suggests what you were doing wrong." And that really struck me, that a high school kid could say that at the time. I've read a lot of great quotes since then of people who've grown up and have time to put their words together. But to be able to say that at the time, I think is pretty neat. This other part of this has to do with a subject that's interesting to me and maybe to Jeff Butler. But sometimes sportsmanship, even though games start with the sportsmanship creed, people don't always follow it in the games that we cover. And we've seen situations where certain teams, I won't name any names, Dinwiddie, but will kind of kick you when you're down and will run up the score. And if you call them out on it and maybe say on the air, hey, they're calling it, they don't like it when you say that, when you do your little Howard Cosell, like I like to tell it like it is. So anyway, that's created a little brouhaha. Can't put that genie back in the bottle. But Coach Littlepage would never do that, and you'll hear why.
I was one that never had qualms about what the other team was gonna do. I've had good friends to tell me, Coach, you get to play them again. They ran the score up on you. You run it up on them, and I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna play it the way that I want to. I don't care what the other day. If we're beat, if we lose by 1 or 2 points, or we lose by 21 or 22, there won't many of those. But just say if it's still a loss.
Yeah.
You know, I just don't believe in that. I don't know, you know, people call it payback or whatever, but that was not my outlook on it. Hey, this game, when it's over, it's over. We'll play again. We'll see what happens. I was one that,
And this kind of speaks for itself.
but my outlook on it was very simple. If you made the team, they were like my sons. They were all Blue Devils. And I really felt that way. And you know, I never tried to number players, but if as a so-called 13th player, that player meant as much to me by being on that team as any of my 5 starters would be. And I think you treat them fair. You don't always treat them alike, because every kid is a little bit different, you know. Sometimes maybe a good kick in the butt might be what they need. Other times you put your arms around the neck and love them a little bit. And I don't mean I literally kicked them in the butt, but you know, you get the idea. You have to be a little severe sometimes.
And that was the lawyer disclaimer I was going. Statute of limitations and all that. No, I did not coach in that. And he never kicked anybody.
That's one of the favorite things of mine, is to have contact with my former players, whether they drop by here or give me a phone call. You mentioned Eagles, and he and I stay in touch an awful lot. I talked to him just last week, and that means a lot to me, because I always said when I was coaching, and I certainly mean it when I'm not coaching too, that my door is always open, whether it would have been my office door at the high school or my front door here at the house.
And he meant that. After he got sick, you know, around early April or so, 2022, there was a parade of folks, a lot of Hopewell All-Stars, a few people I see here today coming to the house. I was able to go by several times and see him, and he was in great spirits all the way to the end. He was grateful, which I think is a very important thing in life. It's kind of one of Tony Bennett's, gratefulness, and I see a lot of parallels there with other really successful people. But like I said, I think Coach Littlepage did what he wanted to do, and did it as well as anyone could possibly do it. He also, not that he needed it, but, well, actually, before I get to that, obviously he stayed a really long time. We weren't sure he wasn't sure he was, but he did, and we're all better for it. Let me just give you, in his words, the why.
I don't know what it was. I fell in love with Hopewell. I really did. Things just fell into place. I love the people that I work with every day, you know, regardless of whether they were the principal, assistant principal, co-teachers, co-coaches, whatever, you know. It's just been that, and I have felt that way all these years. I still love Hopewell, and that's why I'm still here.
Charles.
I don't know what.
And now I mentioned the halls of fame. Here they all are. He was inducted in 5 of them. Upper left, you see the Virginia Sports Hall of Fame, which incidentally, my father-in-law's father-in-law helped found in Portsmouth. Mitt Owens, who was a all-star at what we called VPI back then, but was a great player, scored 3 touchdowns in a game against VMI, and had a big role in the Wall of Fame. So these things all have connections to the Hall of Fame, I should say. The one across from there is the Virginia High School Hall of Fame. He's a member, he was a charter member of that. And then a big one here is the National High School Athletic Coaches Hall of Fame. He was inducted there the year 1993 when he was named National Coach of the Year. Let that sink in. National High School Coach of the Year. BC, in this case, stands for Bridgewater College. Dr. Lehman, make sure I give this back to you. Thank you for that. He was inducted in that Hall of Fame that made him most proud. And he was also inducted into our own Hopewell Hall of Fame, which he had a hand in starting. He thought it was a necessary thing to do when he started it. It was named the Wall of Fame, but it's very much a Hall of Fame. And he was, of course, voted, not by himself, but by everyone else, into the inaugural class. So that's quite a resume that few, if anybody I know, could match. I will leave you with this. And I'm actually on time. I'm proud of that. There's a lot to cover. But this is goodbye for now. I'm not sure what the next one's going to look like. There's plenty more to talk about with Coach Littlepage and other sports at Hopewell and other history. But I'm not sure where we're going after this. I hope this gave you a good feel of the man who was just a remarkable person and just made a huge difference in a lot of lives. But one of the things we did that, I don't know if you approved of or not, it's not maybe the greatest sportsmanship. At the time, beginning of the 1960s, this song came out, and it was quickly adopted by colleges and high schools everywhere. And you would sing this song when you had victory in the bag, when it was victory all the time, you know, when the game was out of reach, and you might be rubbing it in a little bit to the other team. But you're basically saying goodbye, see you later. You're done, we won, time to go, and it's time to go for us, so I will play part of this song. Goodbye.